Hi, everyone. Welcome to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. I'm Langdon DeMint.
And I'm Julian Taylor.
And welcome to our podcast.
Hello, and welcome to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. In fact, it's actually two bald guys and a guy with too much hair, in my opinion, today. Somebody who talks even more than we do. But hopefully has got some really good stuff to talk about. Mark Wilkinson. So, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, both of you. It's great to be here. Two bald guys talking safety, and one that's been blessed with more hair than most. So we're going to make a great show out of that, I'm sure. And we could also be three men in hoodies talking safety.
That's what I was thinking.
That's the big one.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Mark, I'm going to throw it over to you because you've got one of the, I don't say this the wrong way, the sort of the weirder backgrounds of people who've been on this podcast in terms of what you've done and how you've come to safety. So talk to us about sort of that journey that you've been on.
Should we call it weird or should we call it more interesting?
Which I was not going to say weird.
A better description. Yeah.
I would not have said weird.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I just
it's a journey.
It's all part of the piece for me. I was a resident DJ at Ministry of Sound when I was 25 years of age. I had a record in the top 10, so I was a record producer and also a remixer of many famous artists. And I had a great time as a younger guy. I fell into the music business when I was about 17 and worked my way up, travelled to 65 countries, had a wonderful time. Some amazing experiences. And then one day in my flat, I collapsed and in central London in my flat and I couldn't walk. My leg gave way. And I'm laying on the floor thinking, well, what's just happened? Because I was conscious. But essentially, over the ensuing 18 months after the collapse, my body froze. I couldn't walk. I couldn't move around. I basically lost all my faculties really in physically, but mentally I also went down into a spiral. Never would have done it, but definitely had suicidal thoughts and challenges. And it was a really, really tough time. It kicked me, while I was down and I had no sick pay or anything. So I wasn't earning any money from music at that time. But I'd always worked in music and events. And I won't go into it in great detail, but I wrote a book called Life Remixed, released it like 3-4 years ago now. It's done very, very well. And it's about that story of recovering from that. So this is how much fun I had. This is how bad it got. And these are all the things I did to fix it. And they're all in Life Remixed. But as part of fixing it, I started to work in Asia. I was doing some work over there on some radio shows. And I met a guy who was from local to me here. And he was working offshore in health and safety. And I was listening to him more and more and getting more and more engaged with what he was saying about the psychology of accidents and the NEBOSH course that he'd done and everything else. And I was like, this sounds really good. It sounds like really something that I could get into because I was looking for the Life Remix. I was looking for the change or something that I could do differently rather than just be in the music, I didn't want to be a 65-year-old DJ necessarily. I wanted to be doing some other things as well. And I got to a point where, I started to get into safety. I got a job working at the London Olympics and very quickly was asked to take over the safety for the London Olympic Stadium back in 2011, 2012, which was a huge undertaking for my first proper health and safety job, but I took it on and went for it. And then from there, I worked my way through the sort of next 10 years of working in some really senior projects, the best of which was Heathrow Airport. So I worked my way right up there and became the head of commercial health and safety for the entire airport at Heathrow, which was amazing. And all the way through that journey, much as I enjoy working in safety and I enjoy helping people feel safe and they go home at the end of their day's work in order to enjoy their money and work with, be with their families and stuff like that. I always felt there was something more. There was sort of something missing, because we had all these amazing procedures and policies and all the great paperwork and everything else in place that legally you required, and also, best practice, people doing the best they could. and yet still people were getting hurt or worse. And I just needed to find something else that I felt that was going to help people, and that's when I discovered the e-colours.
I think it'd be really good to talk a bit about some of the stuff you did on the Olympic Stadium, or some of the challenges you found on the Olympic Stadium. Maybe we do that first, and then we come into e-colours, because it might sort of help to expand that conversation. So you talk about, we have policies, we have procedures, people still get hurt. What did you find were some of the challenges trying to manage a project like building that stadium?
Well, certainly, I worked for Locock, so it was the end of the build into the event. So I was doing a lot of work with handover between different contractors, a lot of large scale inductions, but certainly the challenges were more for me around the management of people, and the fire safety was a big one, and crowd safety. But what I discovered was that even as self-reflection, which ties into the e-colours and what we're really here to talk about, is that ultimately I was, when I first did my e-colours were yellow over blue, so it's a big socialiser, a big relator in the e-colours world, slightly different to some of the others. So yellow blue was a relating socialiser, and one of my big potential limiters that came up in my e-colours report was actually something about what makes it difficult for me to stop the job. So I'm a health and safety professional walking around with this potential limiter about, I don't like conflict, I don't want to upset people. The easiest way to describe it was, as a DJ, I'm going to say everybody loved me, right? Most people loved me because I was playing the music they liked and they were dancing and enjoying themselves. I became a health and safety professional. Not everybody loved me anymore.
Yeah.
And and with my personality style, that was, as I discovered, it was really, really challenging. And the big thing for me was someone might get mad at me. So if someone got angry with me when I wanted to talk to them about safety, and can we just check on your paperwork and make sure everything's right, and is there a safer way to do that? All those kind of great conversations that safety professionals are required to have. If someone got angry, it would really bother me. Like emotionally, it would really bother me. And so that was my biggest personal challenge. And then outside of that, there was all the other challenges around that, as a people pleaser, wanting everyone to be happy. And as we all know, on big projects, sometimes people are not particularly happy for different reasons. They've got different, competing priorities. So, it was a great time. Don't get me wrong. Working on the Olympics was my big break into safety. It was a brilliant project to be on. And there were challenges. There were challenges generally with people. All the procedures were there and everything was well written and the RAMs were checked and everything else. But it was generally issues and behavioural issues with people. Sometimes they're not even shown the procedure, or they just sign their RAMs and forget about it. But actually, I just observe people constantly, and the question still has to be asked with the fatalities that have risen in the UK. In the review back in July for the last 12 months. What are we missing? Why does this keep still happening?
I'm curious, right quick, Mark, you're alluding to your we've spoken before previously, so that helps. But knowing a little bit of your personality, kind of what you've discussed, a lot here in the States, for example. Now, it's very dependent on where you are regionally, right? But in the South, that type of personality, I don't want to encroach, but at the same time, that open, hey, Jules, how's it going? Hey, yep. Establishing deeper camaraderie, even when you're not meaning to, just because you're an open individual, that can also be a very easy, I'll say, just even inherently trying to draw people in. Did you find that as an advantage or a disadvantage?
Yeah, I'd say my personality style as a friendly, relating, socializing kind of person actually was quite persuasive and kind of overcame a lot of those challenges, which was even harder for me to understand than when I'm being that accommodating, I'm being that nice to people, I'm being that, hey, can we just look at that? Or can we, and if they were getting angry, I found it even more difficult to do it because I was like, sure. Well, what's going on here? We both want the same thing, so let's try and figure it out together. But it was certainly, as I say, it was a big wake up call going from a career where everybody loved me to a career where not everybody loved me is the nice way to say that. So I needed some coping tools of my own. And yeah, the e-colors was clearly the big win for me.
Or even transitioning to Heathrow, right? I mean, that's so I was for 2 years, I was with an organization, a large insurance organization, and I was doing continual risk services. So sometimes their employee count was very small, but the general population was huge. And then they might have massive property, or you mix it all. And the interactions, it seemed like, were some of the most difficult, because you could have someone that's had the best morning ever, and someone that's not even an employee would ruin it just like that. And the next thing you knew, their cognizance kind of dropped a little bit just because of that. So then you have to manage that. You have to figure out, okay, look, you were thrown to the wolves, so to speak, a little bit.
Well, certainly, people would be, if they're in that state of mind, they'll be less productive. They'll be less productive. They'll, depending on their e-colors and their personality style, they'll be less likely to speak up and get involved, or more likely to take a shortcut and take a risk. But, when you can prevent something, or when you can predict something, you can prevent it. And what we found with the work that we do is that personality is completely predictable based on your e-colors results and your e-colors percentages. And once you get that, and you actually start to look at the booklets and all the other work we've got, you start to suddenly go, oh, right. And so the question that we've asked, the biggest question we ask people is, how could I get hurt? And actually asking someone that question, well, how could you get hurt? And then following that question up with, well, how can we prevent that today? So the big one for me as a top color yellow is I like to jump in and help. I have a all-consuming obsession to jump in and help other people. And what I've had to learn over the years is to hit my pause button. Those of you who can see me, I'll pause button on my wrist here because my e-colors are now yellow-red. That pause button has really, really helped me be able to understand how I could get hurt, but also how you could get hurt and you could get hurt. And then how can we prevent that? So when Mark's jumping in to help without thinking, my wife, who's not a top color yellow, she's a top color green, the thinker, she can say, oh, hang on. And I go, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I can see myself doing it, and that's just me and her in our relationship, right? But if you take that out to the entire workforce and the entire world, there are opportunities for personal intervention and being able to intervene with other people when you start to observe their strengths and their potential limits to start to come out from a safety perspective.
I think it's really interesting, Mark, listening to this. I think that point you made about, even as a safety guy, you found it really difficult to stop the job. I mean, that's something we talk about all the time, is how do we just create a culture where people are comfortable sticking their hand up and saying stop, and this is part of it. And I was just reflecting on you talking about the yellow, and I'm absolutely in that same area. And even non-safety, just thinking about just general interactions in the workplace where enthusiasm means you dive in, only to maybe get slapped down in a meeting with people saying, no, we're not going to do it like that. It's that I need one of those pause buttons. But I think it's worth going back a step for the people who are listening to sort of outline, what do we mean by e-colors? Kind of, let's not assume people know what it is. What do we mean by e-colors?
Absolutely. So e-colors is a personality diversity theory that has been researched incredibly well, better than anything else I've ever seen, whereby we all have personality styles. So it's a bit like old wine in new bottles, right? If you go back thousands of years, you've got, the Chinese, came up with earth, wind, fire and water, etc. It's gone through many, many different metamorphoses. Myers-Briggs, MBTI, came about Second World War for important reasons at that time. But there's lots of other tools out there, and some are better than others. The bit for me is the e-colors is about safety. So, earth, wind, fire and water. Earth for us would be green, data, earthy, analytical, serious. Blue is water, empathy, very cool, calm, loyal, supportive. Yellow is wind, socializer, talk. You recognise that I talk quite a lot already. And then the red, fire, is the doer, to get things done. Let's get on with it. And then so all the work that's been put together by my colleagues in Equilibria is started from safety. It actually started, and I only found this out a couple of weeks ago. I didn't realise it was quite this dramatic. 7 fatalities in 2 months they had in one particular area of the world. 7. As a safety professional, can you even, 20-something years ago, 7 fatalities in 2 months? It's like, it doesn't. It's like
horrendous, isn't it?
Incredible, to think about that. And when you're faced, I don't even want to imagine being faced with that. But if you're faced with that as a safety professional, Lewis Senior, my friend and CEO of Equilibria, essentially that was the question he asked: What are we missing? How does this keep happening? We've got all our policies, we've got all our procedures. What are we missing? And then they started to research, because they'd done a bit of work on personality. They started to research by asking questions of personality styles. So it's a very simple thing to do. You find out your E-colours in 15 minutes by doing a quick questionnaire. But from there, just a few of the questions from safety perspectives: how could I get hurt? How can I make an error? What makes it difficult to stop the job? How do I disrupt teamwork, and how is it disrupted for me? And how to address a procedural challenge, and why won't some people follow procedures? And when you start, that's just a few of the questions asked. We've asked 30, 40, 50 questions of people. We're running something at the moment about, your fears and relating fears to personality styles and seeing how that works out for people. But again, it's continuous research. It's continuously looking into something. We don't tell people what their personality style is. They tell us. They answer the questions. They get their percentages, and then we work with them to coach them so that they can improve. We'd like to say with the pause and play button that I was talking about on my wrist. But making sure that, the ultimate goal is to keep people safe, keep them happy, healthy, and wealthy. When I read that article recently, we were talking about in the pre-chat about fatalities going up, in the last 12 months. There is more to do. There's more we can do outside of what we're doing already. And I personally believe that this is it.
And I think even in that article, it was kind of intimating that things like policies and procedures need to be more robust, didn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than actually focusing on why aren't people taking any notice or following the policies and procedures at the moment?
Well,
so
I agree with everything that was said in that particular article that we're talking about. Yes, of course, policies and procedures must be robust. Yes, they must be communicated really well. So there was nothing. Yeah. There was nothing wrong per se with the actual tone of the article. But I just looked at it and just thought, we're missing the trick here. We're missing the person. Because the simple question, in fact, the way this has come about, if you remember, you were hosting a brilliant online chat about psychological safety. And I sent you a couple of questions in the chat box, and you very kindly answered them for me. But it was like the questions I asked were, do you think different personality styles see and manage risk differently? And do you think that psychological safety needs to be developed, not demanded? And once you have the answers to those two questions, then that's the answer to doing more work proactively upfront rather than reactively after, people getting hurt or worse.
Anybody who comes on the podcast and calls me brilliant is welcome on anytime. You can come back anytime, Mark. Thank you.
We all love
Mark.
Langdon
it was nice meeting you. Talk to you again one day, maybe.
Langdon, also brilliant. You're also brilliant.
Oh, thank you. You don't mean that. But it is interesting that, so if you look at, a friend of mine's doing a lot of research in SIF. I've done some serious injury fatality. If you look at some of the precursors that have been done from experts, and if you think from Edison Electric all the way down to, it's really spanning construction more. So a lot of large organizations, industries as well. Some of the top precursors that were found were workers not following procedures and the lack of hazard recognition, training, fatigue. So you just think of those 4 that can happen to anyone. And so many times we get caught up in, well, do you have a safety program? And I get it. You need to have that foundation, but yes. Okay. Well, now what? Well, I don't know. It's in the filing cabinet back there. So you start to see, even when this exists, and that's where I was thinking how this, to me, really ties in. Because if you have all these procedures, policies, programs, great job. But if it's not real and you're having workers who know the job better than anyone, who are slightly construing where they can be exposed to a hazard, not anyways, I'm not going to say what good is it, but what good is it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's quite often that, if we're being real, a lot of the people that are actually doing the work, maybe haven't even been told the procedure. They might have had a risk assessment and a method statement stuck in front of them, but, the procedures are in a book somewhere or on a file somewhere or whatever. But the key point is, for me, is that giving people some self-awareness about how they could get hurt, what makes it difficult for them to speak up, and then potentially giving them some access to training and coaching so they can improve, be safer, be more productive. That is the answer to developing your people, and not being in front of a judge or having to go through accident investigations and all that stuff that happens when you have these very, very serious incidents. And, the fact that this particular system, e-Colors from Equilibria, was designed in oil and gas to stop those kind of like tragic numbers that I was talking about earlier. Each one of those is a family, a person who doesn't go back to a family and stuff like that, and has been proven over 20 plus years to reduce, accidents, incidents, near misses, and improve communication, productivity, etc. It's something that really helped me at the Olympics 10 years ago. And so I've been a champion of it ever since. And what I'm finding actually now, the UK is a lot more ready for this information than it was 10 years ago. Because I remember talking about this 10 years ago with people, and it was kind of like, sort of, a bit over their head, or very, very cynical, like, well, whatever. And there's still a bit of that about, and we're humans. I expect that, it's fine. Ultimately, there's a lot more open-mindedness now to, let's look at our people, let's develop our people, coach our people, give them some self-awareness, and that's my mission in life. And obviously I'm well aware it's, majority of your great work as well.
We hope you're enjoying the session, but for all you listeners out there, this is now coming to the end of part 1. So stay healthy, stay safe, watch each other's back out there, and join us next time for part 2 with Mark. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. Don't forget to follow and subscribe wherever you stream your podcast, or you can visit us at evotix.com.
And if you've liked today's podcast or you found some value from it, we'd really appreciate it if you could head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review or a rating. It really means a lot to us. Thank you.